Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, I want to give you a heads up. I have been working along with someone else on a very big secretive project that I have mentioned briefly from time to time. I think a lot of you are going to enjoy it when it's finally finished, but it has taken an awful long time and is still got a little bit of a way to go. Anyway, we've made some serious headway now. And I would really appreciate it if you would help me spread the word when it's out by following me on Twitter, so that when it is released, more people will know about it. Now, I know some of you don't have it, but if you do, I would really appreciate it if you could just give me a follow. Link at the top of the description, and Instagram too, if you want. That helps as well. Alright then, but for now, it's time to get comfortable. Get your spook on, and let the darkness take control. My 23-year-old mother was murdered when I was a baby. It happened in our house and nobody knew what actually happened. Throughout my life, there have been times where I feel like she's around, and the last few weeks, I have felt like it non-stop. I don't have any form of audio or video to prove this, but I feel her, and I've seen her in dreams for years. So for a little backstory, her life was tragically cut short in 1998. I was 2 and the youngest of 3 children. I was the only one home when she died. My dad, brother and sister were on a mini trip for the week. I think why I feel her and my siblings haven't is because when she passed away, she knew I was still home. And I think she wanted to protect me, and just hasn't ever left. So the house I mentioned where my mum's life was cut short, I used to see shadow figures pretty commonly. I never saw her, but I felt her presence from time to time since I was a kid. And I would see shadow figures, and at one point I drew them, but the drawings are on an iPad that is now broken. The 2 main ones I would see were a shadow figure wearing a hat, which I've read is pretty common. I never saw eyes nor face. It was just that, a dark mass. This was always seen in the downstairs bedroom. The other shadow figure I would see a lot was a long, lanky one. I don't think I've read about them, but they were long and seemed to be slouched down. They usually looked like they have their heads held down like they were sad. Sometimes I would see 2 or 3 of these at once. I never saw these in my bedroom, almost always on the main floor of the house, and even if I looked at them, it's like they needed me to see them. Kind of rarely, but sometimes around the house I would see the hooded shadow figure, who again I think is a common one. The hats and hooded shadows always seem scary, but not the lanky sad ones. I wouldn't go near them if I saw them, but I never felt scared or hid when I did. So, there's been a time I've seen a ghost as well. I was in my bedroom upstairs. I remember I woke up and saw a bright ghost. I could see his face and uniform, and he told me to get out, which is when I moved my bedroom from upstairs to downstairs. The ghost almost appeared to look like a Civil War or colonial man. I'm not a history person, but he was definitely old-timey. The last story is one of my brother's friends that used to come over all the time and would always hang out in the basement. The basement was unfinished when we moved in, but we finished it, and the bathroom in the basement was always scary to me. It always felt like I was being watched in there, even though I never saw anything. So anyway, my brother's friend one day went in there and ran out and had my dad call his parents to pick him up. We didn't know why for many years, until one day he told us that he saw a full-bodied apparition of an old man with a big beard in there. After that, he never returned to our house. After we moved, I've never seen a shadow or ghost. It's been 7 years now, and I still feel my mum's presence, like I used to, in the old house. I am a 25-year-old and live in the UK. I've always believed in the paranormal and have had a few experiences in my life, and have been told by a medium that I am sensitive to it. This particular experience happened at my Aunt Claire's house when I was around 10. She used to live in a small 2-bedroom house in a town called Greenhill. Many things happened in this house in the few years that she lived there, and I can safely say I am so glad that she moved away from this awful, accursed home. It started out with small little things, like footsteps being heard when no one was moving around the house, and things moving by themselves, as well as shadows out of the corner of your eye. But things took a pretty sinister turn in the space of a week when a few key events happened. The first scary thing that occurred was between myself and my aunt's 2 sons, Tyler and Seb. We spent a lot of time in the backyard playing in the mud and climbing trees, but on this particular day, we opted to dig a hole for some reason. I don't really remember why, but regardless, we dug at the dirt at the bottom of the garden. This garden was long and led to the forest and fields on the back of the house. It was cut off from them with an old rotten wooded fence. We chose to dig in the middle of the trees at a particularly muddy area, and as soon as we hit something hard, we decided to dig it out, assuming as children that it was some lost treasure we were unearthing and that we had hit the jackpot. Instead, as we dug, we found a skull. We screamed for my aunt and mum and showed them, and they looked at each other mumbling about being someone's old pet, but at the time I thought nothing of it. But would find out at the age of 18 it was the skull of a baby, and that my aunt never managed to find out any information on it even after taking it to the police. This would then start a chain of events that none of us foresaw. It happened on firework night, and myself, Seb, Tyler, Claire, my mum and dad and my aunt's boyfriend were chilling downstairs. All the kids bar myself were asleep, when we heard the sound of boots on the floor above us, which was impossible, as we were the only ones home and everyone was accounted for in the living room. My aunt shrugged it off and said that it must be pipes. A while later, I walked past the stairway to get into the kitchen, and from the corner of my eye, I saw something that resembled the large shadow of a man swinging from the ceiling of the landing. I stopped and let out a little shriek, and it was gone. My aunt asked me what I'd seen, and I told her, and she looked sick. I was later to learn that this is a regular occurrence. Along with the occurrence was one that I myself had witnessed when asleep in bed, when we had stayed over for the night, as we did often. Both the boys would be in bed, and you would hear children's laughter and running through the house. Later that night, scratching could be heard throughout the house, but could never be placed, as each time you thought you had pinned it, it would move to the opposite wall or area you were at. We were watching a film called Silence of the Lambs, which certainly didn't help the atmosphere. Great film, by the way. And halfway through the film, my dad left to get takeout, so the movie was paused as we all sat laughing and talking, when an almighty boom resounded through the house coming from upstairs. We all leaped upstairs, including my sleeping cousins, who awoke, startled and confused. We proceeded to follow my aunt's boyfriend upstairs to investigate, and on first glance nothing seemed to be amiss. All the doors were open, and nothing seemed to have fallen. This all changed when my aunt's son Tyler asked, "Mum, what's that?" pointing to something laying against the wall. My aunt bent to pick it up and almost threw it at my mum, gasping, "My God." I looked at my mum, who was holding a small white and pink laced baby shoe that had small dark patches on it. Everyone had gone as white as a ghost and looked startled. I should now say that my aunt had no girls at the time, and the boys were 9 and 6. This is when my mum looked up and shouted, "Claire, the attic's open. How the hell is it open?" When I tell you the attic's open, I don't just mean it was unsealed. See, in this house, In the attic, you'd need to push up and slide across to open it, and rarely do they have ladders, at least these houses don't. This particular attic wasn't just open, but the lid had been completely pushed up and moved to the inside of it. So the attic was now completely open, and you could see all the darkness above and the shininess of the plastic bin bags ahead. This was insane. As before my aunt had moved in, the attic had been checked and resealed, as the attic was completely empty and had new heat protection in there, so there should be no black bags in there. The reason the opening of the attic was also so terrifying is because the attic had been painted over and sealed with a special sealant to keep it and to stop any draft from coming through it. My aunt's boyfriend then retrieved the bag to find that it was a bag of baby clothes that had never been seen there before and did not belong to my aunt. We were all rushed downstairs, and a few hours later my dad and my aunt's boyfriend had a fire going and burnt the shoe and baby clothes. I still today don't know what was on the baby's shoe, and I have never wanted to ask for fear of an answer. The story does not end here though. After this event, the feeling in the house got worse and became a dark and scary place to stay. And you could feel as though you were being watched and would often feel someone breathe on your neck. My aunt only managed to cope for a year when she decided to move away and get out the house. 6 months after she left, there was a house fire there, and the man who lived there sadly passed away. But this got my aunt interested, and she looked into the history of the house, and was horrified to discover upon researching that the house had a dark past, which had meant that every household had either lost one member or the family in its entirety who occupied it. This is where things started to make sense. The man who lived there before had had severe depression and ended his life on the landing light fixture. The family beforehand had lost members to carbon monoxide poisoning, and the family before that had lost a child and a family pet to a house fire. The record she found only went back so far, but there's still so much unknown about the house. We, however, believe that the house was cursed, and my aunt was lucky to have gotten out alive with her entire family. I know the house is still there, and my ex-fiancé lives not too far away from it, but I have no desire to go back and find out what happened to anyone else who lived there, and it was a really dark and scary time for me and my aunt. We've never looked back, and personally I avoid going anywhere near it. I've got an interesting story I would like to share with you. So, family from my mother's side have been having some strange events happen to them. My maternal grandfather talked about his mum and dad standing around him 3 days before he passed, and the day he did die, he told my aunt that his parents were in the room and telling him that he would be joining them at 2:30 that night. He breathed his last that hour. My maternal uncle woke up suddenly in the dead of night, and his wife asked him where did he think he was going at 3 a.m. He replied that his mother was outside asking him to come over to her. He died within 20 minutes. My late mother asked me once who was the third person besides you and your father as you were talking to me. I replied no one. Later she said her parents were there saying that she would be with them shortly and that they would have to come and take her. Sometime later, she named a few more folks standing around her and passed away shortly after. But the strangest of all these occurrences is that of a 28-year-old man, the son of a very close family friend of my parents-in-law. It baffles me to this day. He was visiting his parents on leave from Moscow, where he was stationed as part of a MNC staff. His younger sister was getting married and the house was packed with guests. He woke up at 12:30 at night, was a bit panicky. His Russian wife called in his elder brother, who found his youngest brother crying in a state of panic. The younger man asked for his mother, and once she arrived, asked for her to stay with him, since they would arrive at 4 a.m. to take him. The guy was clean, had always been drug-free, His older brother suggested they visit a hospital and let them run whatever tests they need to. Maybe he was suffering from something, and perhaps it was just a nightmare, but he agreed and insisted that his mother came along. They brought him to a nearby facility. The ER docs and nurses were skeptical, but they ran the tests anyway. Alcohol, drugs, EKG, and a few others, all normal. They told him that he was as fit as a fiddle and could proceed home. However, the young man was still panicky, and at the insistence of the family, the hospital agreed to detain him until morning. A few minutes before 4 a.m. he said, "They have arrived. They are tall, many of them in white robes. Their faces are covered and they are angels. They are all surrounding my bed and the room is full of them." At precisely 4 a.m. he went limp, ceased breathing, and was declared dead. "3 years ago, I went to Gettysburg with my family. I've been interested in the paranormal since I was small, always drawn to it, seeing and hearing things often. When I left for college, things started happening to my sister, and we realized that she was clairvoyant, and I myself am sensitive. My dad decided he wanted to test this, so he signed the family up for a ghost tour at an old Civil War field hospital that was turned into a home, then an inn, and finally a landmark. We found out that after many bodies had been thrown from the kitchen to an area besides a building, a woman had ended her life after the government lied about the whereabouts of her fiancé during World War II. There was simply so much death. Upon going up to the second floor, I couldn't breathe. I had a panic attack and no warning. I should have left them, but I went on. The others went to the attic. I followed, and later my sister said that she could have heard a noose tightening. My parents and I saw shadows. We spoke to spirits. It was surreal. They told the men to get out of the bathroom, perhaps because the ladies needed privacy even in death. Things happened. There was so much activity and I felt watched. We ended up in what used to be a prison for Confederate soldiers. They liked underage women. My sister had been about 16. Her hair was played with, she was scratched, and 3 lines on the back appeared. I felt wrong. We left and I was angry. We had 2 more days or so in Gettysburg, and I think I was so wrong that I couldn't get all of these negative thoughts out my head. I had nightmares. Everything people did annoyed me, and I was inconceivably angry. As soon as we crossed state lines, did I feel that I could breathe again. Later, I was researching about demonic oppression, a step down from possession. It leaves the victim angry, depressed, suicidal, and violent, suffering from night terrors. But nothing touched me. No. Later, I was researching, and although I'm not sure what it was, I don't think it was demonic oppression. It was just oppression by some pissed off spirits. I'm sensitive, so vulnerable, especially going into places that are so packed with energy. I was essentially going in there with a target on my back. My depression, my eating disorders, my deteriorating mental state as a whole added to the fact that I had secretly stopped taking my medication, also added to the fact that I was feeling insane amounts of jealousy towards my little sister, as my father only seemed to be concerned with her powers, even though I had been doing it for a lot longer. And all of this culminated in a large hole in my defenses. Trying to act big and mighty in the face of something you thought you knew about, but really had no experience in dealing with, is a surefire way to get attacked. It's rarely demons doing the attacking. If it was, well, you'd know about it. I'd like to think that I've grown in the last 6 years since everything's occurred. I found the universe exists in various shades of grey. There is neither good or evil, just lighter and darker varieties. When I was younger, the show Ghost Hunters was a new thing. Me and my friend used to hang around the local ice rink in Flagstaff, Arizona, and call out spirits for fun. The first night was something I'll never forget. That night, we saw a soda can get lifted and suspended in the air for a second, then drop. There's a shed next to the ice rink with a garage door, and there was a banging on the door and the lights came on inside. The only way to get in was the side door or the garage door, and neither had been opened. We started telling some other people about it. Next thing you know, people would come around the woods, Buffalo Park, next to the ice rink to call out spirits. We've seen full-body apparitions with red eyes. 3 people saw a little girl turn into a wolf and run off into pitch darkness at the same time. We've had several people with us when we saw yellow darting eyes and had a drum approach us at the very end, and it was like someone banged a drum in front of us and everyone ran in fear. Some wild stuff. Hard to get others to believe my story, so I hardly tell them. And years later I went through a religious phase and became Christian after straightening my life out. While praying in my living room, my bedroom was tossed around. I heard my name being called out by what sounded like a chorus, and I had a demonic hiss in my ear, and I thought I could feel the breath of whatever it was after I prayed for God to help me with this strange encounter. It stopped after that, and didn't resume until another 2 years later. I was with my girlfriend at the time, asleep in my room, when I woke up laying on my side, and I saw what looked like black stripes of cloth that had a smoky texture to them above my girlfriend. Half awake, I reached over to hear and shook her. Then I rolled over to see what looked like the Grim Reaper on my ceiling. It was like a hooded figure, pitch black, smoky texture, but you could see the outline of its body, like its arms, head, and torso. Its robes were moving like they were alive. It was the hardest thing to explain, but I felt like every part of this being was alive, like some sort of energy you could sense. It leaned down like it was trying to get a better look of me, and I lost it. My body automatically started to scream on its own, louder than I had ever done before. The feeling of fear I felt that day was the most surreal thing I could ever explain. It was so horrific and dreadful, the feeling. My girlfriend woke up amongst the screams and she saw it as well and shut down, crying under her blanket, while I shouted at it to go away. It was like my brain knew what to do, but my body went into action yelling, and I just watched, and I ended up actually passing out from the fear. The passing out was unusual. I've been on a plane that had an engine failure and almost crashed into trees, and the fear I felt from that, thinking I was certainly going to pass from this, was not even close to the fear that thing gave me. It was like my soul was afraid of it, not just my body, my mind. After that encounter, we had a door pop open on its own after waking up at 3 a.m, and that was the end of it for a long time. Fast forward to now, I live in an apartment with my daughter and her mother. We've not had much unusual stuff happen since we've been together. The only strange thing we've had is we both wake up at 1:20 a.m, and when my girlfriend was pregnant and her waters broke minutes after. But that I think is just a coincidence. But the other night I woke up and saw a dark figure rising out of the space between our closet and doorway. Thinking I was just half awake and still dreaming, I shrugged it off as that, just a dream. Then the following day, my girlfriend and me are home, and we start hearing serious banging on the bathroom door while in the living room watching TV. I rush to see why my girlfriend is making so much noise, and we meet in the hallway. She was frustrated, asking why I would scare her like that, and told her I had just gotten up to see what the noise was, and she gave me a frightened look and told me she didn't believe me, and we got into a short argument about it. The next night I'm awake in bed next to her, and we're both on our phones when we hear what sounds like someone going through our kitchen drawers. The sound of silverware rustling around and the wood drawers sliding open was enough to make me get up and grab my Mossberg and my girlfriend to phone the police. I turn on my tack light and investigate for potential intruders. When I hit the kitchen, it's clear that the kitchen drawers are open, which is strange. I switch on the light, and the living room light is on, but there's nothing. I check my daughter's playroom and the bathroom, and it's all clear. I realize no windows have been opened, the front door is locked and not messed with, and I tell my girlfriend to inform the dispatcher there was no break-in. They tell her they still want to send an officer to follow out, but we decline and let the woman on the phone know we'll call if need be. We make sure the house is clear one final time, talk about what happened and go to sleep. Just this morning I wake up with my girlfriend and we start our day as usual by heading up to the kitchen to get our daughter's breakfast started. But now everything is open. Drawers, cabinets, nothing's thrown out, nothing is taken nor destroyed. But we both look at each other. We know something isn't right, and we try and see what we can do. My girlfriend found a shop that sells crystals and all the other kinds of stuff, and we get something called Hollywood and candles. We're told to burn the candles while burning the Hollywood, and say a prayer while walking into the room with the burning Hollywood. As far as this moment goes, I haven't seen or heard anything, but I'm 100% certain something did attach itself to me at some point. All I'm hoping is this is the end, and I've gotten rid of it. When I was in 8th grade, I used to live with my mother in a camper which sat in my grandmother's backyard. The living situation was tough, and when you have 2 people and a dog living in a 50 square foot space, things can get annoying. The camper was a stone's throw away from my grandmother's trailer, and late one night I woke up having serious stomach trouble. Obviously, since there was no working toilet in the camper, I had to run up to Mama Linda's to use the bathroom. Crucial and funny fact, I sleep with no clothes on, and I don't use a bathroom with clothes on either. Weird, I know, but anyway, I got out of bed, put on some shorts and grabbed my shirt, because I was in a hurry. When I opened the back door of the trailer, I had my shirt halfway in case I ran into Grandma. Sure enough, there she stood in the middle of the hallway. She had cancer at the time and had to go to the bathroom many times during the night. She told me to go ahead and that she would wait on me. So I bolted in. When I got there, I dropped all my clothes next to the toilet and did my thing. Here's where things get a little crazy. When I was done, I looked over to find my clothes, and yet there were none there. Only my undergarments remained. Thinking this was crazy, I went back into the hall and asked my grandma, "When I came into the house, I was putting on a shirt, right?" "Yes," she said. "Where are they?" I told her I had no idea. So I left out the back door and went back to the camper. On my bed laid my shorts and shirt, neatly folded. I was terrified because I remember having them on when I got to Mima's house, and she remembered me fiddling with my shirt. Not to forget this was in the wee hours of the morning, and through 3 closed doors. How on earth did my clothes weasel themselves from next to me through 3 walls without me even knowing? So this story happened when my family went out to watch my sister's school game, sports thing. I was around 14, and I wasn't feeling great, so stayed home watching Enter the Dragon. While watching the movie, I heard our side door open. The hinges were really creaky, and then it shut. Then about 2 to 3 heavy footsteps, like someone wearing heavy boots, which made sense as this was December in Michigan. I called out again, but this time I was getting the hairs on my arms and legs sticking up. I was spooked, and again nothing. I said, "Nope," and bolted out the back sliding door and didn't see my parents' car they took, then hid in the truck bed that was covered in the front of our house for a sec to see if I could see anyone in the house through the living room window. While I waited, I saw a visible human shadow pass in front of the TV. The curtains were closed, mind you, and I bolted like half a mile to a family friend's house. Not fun, barefoot in winter. They took me in and called the cops after I explained what happened and why I was there. The cops came and checked it out but didn't find anything. No wet footprints in our breezeway that let the side door or any wet footprints in the house. The side door was also locked, and they even checked for tracks in the snow around the house, but nothing except for my bare footprints running away. I still stand by what I saw and heard, and know it wasn't from the movie itself. The house did and still scares me. This all happened at the same house, which was an 100-year-old farmhouse that was also a part of the Underground Railroad. We no longer live there. The house doesn't even stand there anymore. It's a very expensive neighborhood. My parents said that they were sitting on our couch and watching TV. The fireplace shutters opened and closed several times on their own. On another occasion, my mum was sitting in the same living room. Towards her front was a large wooden deck that had a fireplace in the center and two large windows on either side. To the right was a concrete porch that ran the length of the side of the house. It had a door off to the side and had several large windows on it as well. To her back was a bedroom that us kids shared in the winter because it was easier to heat half the house. To her left was the blue room. The whole thing was blue, but it was just a central room where our computer happened to be and had access to the basement. Anyway, on the wooden deck, my mum saw a black figure that was as tall as a bear but too thin to be human. She said that it looked at her and had a feeling it was watching her. It wasn't completely dark outside, but it was on its way. The figure then started doing laps around the house. It would pass the window in front of her every few seconds. This was a 2,500-ish square foot farmhouse. It was incredibly fast. We had a small family farm of chicken, goats, pigs, quail, turkeys and ducks. Nothing big, but we had 30 chickens at the time. Living that far out in the country, we always set up traps by the coop to catch possums and raccoons, anything that ate chickens. Well, we go outside one day to see a pile of feathers throughout the yard and around the coop. Every single pile had a head on top of it, 30-ish piles, and that many heads. No puddles of blood, no insides anywhere, just piles of feathers and heads. Shortly after this, my dad would go out at night with a shotgun to see if he could find anything. We had gotten more chickens and nothing unusual had set the traps. My dad was a manly man, not scared of anything. I've seen him move a tree by himself out of the road that 4 grown men weren't able to do together. He's tough. So he goes out like he usually does. Our chicken coop sits at about 50 feet-ish in front of the garage. It was really just a 1,000-square-foot ranch outbuilding. We just called it the garage. So we hear 5 blasts or so from the shotgun, and very shortly after, my dad comes through the front door with tears running down his face. He is visibly shaking, and after he calms down a bit, he explains that while in front of the garage he heard a real, guttering growl coming from the tree line right behind and above the garage. He said it wasn't like anything he'd ever heard in his life, and he was an avid hunter. Growing up hunting, he's even heard and probably eaten just about any animal that Indiana has to offer. He said it was low and demonic, and that he could just feel it was evil. He immediately unloaded the shotgun and ran into the house. The next story I don't like to talk about much, but it's relevant. I would hear voices in that house. One night I woke my parents up crying to let them know that the devil wanted my soul and wouldn't stop trying to get me until I gave it to him. I don't remember much about it because this was about 5th grade. I'm 31 now, and since I've been diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, I can see where it might have just been my anxiety, but I definitely remember sitting on the living room floor sobbing at 3 a.m., just begging for the voices to stop. I haven't had anything else at all similar to this event happen. My parents found a tunnel in our basement that we assumed was part of the Underground Railroad. My cousin was over at the time and asked if he could explore it. It was covered up, about shoulder height to an adult, and an adult could crawl through, with not a whole lot of extra room. We had a flashlight and were gone for about half hour. While we were starting to get very worried when we could see the light again, he came back and said that there had not been an end in sight, but he was getting nervous having crawled so far. He was probably about 16-ish. We always had dogs and would just find our dogs in front of our house. Passed away, with no wounds or prior symptoms, simply gone. Sometimes 3 at a time. My dad on the way home from work saw a pile of dead dogs in a field by our house, probably about 5 feet tall. We don't even know how to start to explain that. On another occasion, my 2 brothers and I were in the house and things started to fall off the walls. We ran outside into the field in front of our house and looked across the street to the other cornfield. There were hundreds of deer running. It filled the field for several minutes. Enough disruption caused by them running made it feel like it was a small earthquake. We found out after we moved that there was also a practicing coven that met not far from our house. We heard that a lot of dead animal remains have been found as well. So on to the next creepy thing. A decent amount of years later, I went with my sister to Chicago. Her fiancé had graduated boot camp and was now going to A school. I'm not a military man, so I'm not sure if any of this sounds incorrect. They do a ceremony for family with their group flags and such. They hang out for a bit and then leave for A school. On their way home, I was asleep in the car and my sister had gotten lost. I shot up out of sleeping and told my sister to pull the car over. She did and I told her to turn. She asked what was wrong, and I said that I woke up because we were by our old house and that I could feel it. She made a turn, and we passed the front gates of a cemetery that was right by their house. Had she kept going in that direction, we would have passed right by it. What was at the start of all this was a dream that my sister had. I didn't find out about the dream until I was in high school. Anyway, surrounding the end of the property there was a tree line that separated where the coven met and our house. My sister said that in her dream there were monsters tearing down the tree line and that she knew that if they tore it down, they'd be coming for me. Only me, not my sister nor any of the other people in my family. Well, not long after, in preparation of turning the property into a subdivision, they tore down the tree line. All of the stuff happened. My parents decided one day that we were moving, as we rented, and we had a house purchased on contract, and we were completely moved out in 2 weeks' time. I remembered this other story. This is definitely the event that is the foggiest in my memory. I was in Boy Scouts, and it was the time of the year for popcorn. I sold enough popcorn to be one of the top in the state. That's what my parents told me, at least. I just knocked on doors and pushed the popcorn. My parents had loaded up the van with all the popcorn that we were going to deliver the following morning. It was an old brown/tan Astro van, the ones with the weird curtains in the window. This was completely stuffed with popcorn. We all go to sleep and I remember being outside with my family looking at our van on fire. The fire department came and everything. The thing burnt completely. Well, my dad takes the picture with him to show people because of the crazy story. My dad is showing a guy the picture and the dude asks him if he sees the face. My dad looks at the picture and sees the face. To kind of summarize this, because I don't want to make up details that I don't remember, things started to appear in the picture, like in the flames. It started with a face that turned into a demonic-looking Grim Reaper figure, the scythe and all. Then people started to notice more things as my dad showed it to more people. My dad would hand the picture and ask what they saw. Everyone saw it. Then people started noticing the Reaper figure was holding a chain that was attached to a torn-apart dog, and finally a burning cross behind it. As soon as people started seeing that, my dad stuffed the picture in a Bible. It was one of the Bibles with a built-in zipper, and he didn't tell any of us about it until after we moved. He pulls out the Bible while we're moving and the picture's gone. If I remember right, he was freaked the hell out. I remember my dad always handing the picture to people and then being all creeped out. I remember seeing the fire. I saw the picture once right after it had been taken, and I remember playing on the burnt-up van. It was the late 90s and we were kids. The rest of it is what my parents have talked about. My dad was a server at some restaurant for about 25 years, so he showed it to a ton of people. This isn't just a few buddies. He literally started handing it to his customers. Everyone saw it and started to see more. I was devastated when my father passed away, and I wasn't there to say goodbye as I lived in a different state. After the funeral and I returned home, I started to find rusty quarters, not just one or two but about 15. They were in the oddest places, like my bed, the guest toilet, the seat of my car, in the driveway. There were too many in such a short span of time that I had mentioned it to a friend, and she told me sometimes loved ones who have passed will send signs to let you know they're okay. I pondered that explanation and wondered if it were true and that my father was still around me. A few days later, my best friend invited me to go to my favorite secret beach. I was having a hard day and was just down, thinking about my dad. Before I walked out the door, I said to my empty house, "Dad, if it is you, I could use a quarter, and I will know you are always with me, and I'll never doubt it." I really wasn't expecting a rusty quarter to appear. We arrive at the beach. It was a sheltered cove and nobody else was there except us. It was a cove I loved snorkeling at, but it was low tide, so I lounged in water at the shore. My friend is an avid crab hunter, catching them on the rocks and then letting them go. He told me to stop moping and come catch crabs with him. Reluctantly, I agreed. I set my sights on a small crab, and he scurried under an overhanging rock. I reached my hand back in the cave and stooped up the sand. I was sure I had caught him, but when I opened my hand, I saw a rusty quarter and cried. I still have 16 rusty quarters, and to some, that's all they are. But to me, that's proof that I'm not alone, and my dad is okay. When my mum was 18, she was hit by a city truck that had run a red light. Her collarbone was crushed, and she had slammed her head against the window so hard that paramedics had declared her dead at the scene. Despite being revived in the ambulance, her parents were called and told that she had died, and the local news station also reported the incident as having ended her life. When she arrived in hospital, she was alive but unconscious. She remained in a coma for several weeks before waking up in a confused state. At the time, she could not remember what had happened to her in the moments leading up to the incident, nor could she recall anything from the comatose. My mother was sent to a rehabilitation center previously used as a tuberculosis ward in the 60s. While there, she was horribly mistreated by hospital staff, and even recalls being molested and watched while taking showers. I'm a firm believer in the idea that some people, in order to heal from traumatic events, choose to not remember them at all. I also believed up until recently that this was the coping mechanism my mum used to overcome the trauma surrounding her incident. However, recently my mum started seeing a therapist in an attempt to unlock her memories from the event in order for her to heal from them further. She called me a few nights ago after waking from a dream in which she could recall her comatose state. The following is what she told me she could remember. She told me she remembered hearing people's voices around her, her parents crying, and my father staying by her side the entire time, unwilling to leave even for a second. She remembers hearing many voices constantly, and being unable to respond to them. She remembers feeling trapped in her body, unable to move or tell anyone what was going on. She says she can remember waking up and still feeling trapped for a long time, while her body began to adjust to life again. She told me it was the most painful, miserable experience of her life, but that she was so grateful that she could remember it because she had always been racking her brains for those memories she knew she had. Moral of the story: if someone you care about is in a coma, talk to them, even if you know they can't respond. The sound of your voice will calm them and let them know that you are there. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. Thank you for following me on Twitter. What do you mean you haven't yet? Come on, just go over and click the link. You know you can do it. I believe in you. It'd be great if you could. No joke. I've been working on something for a really long time now. And it's just when you work so long on something, you really want people to hear about it. So I really hope you guys can understand where I'm coming from. You'll like it, trust me. It's made specifically with you guys in mind. So yeah, I don't really want to spoil it just yet or get your hopes up. Not get your hopes up. I just don't want you to start forming your own opinion of it. I just want you to see it as what it is when it's launched. I'm hoping for a Halloween release, which I realize is in 2 months, so perhaps I'm being ambitious. But, I've worked really hard on this, and I'm hoping that it's possible. In any case, if there's a story that you want to share, you know what to do. My email is in the description. And I'd like to give a huge thanks to my lovely patrons, which you can be a part of by clicking the link in the description also. Alright then guys, for now it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.